The new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, as you all probably know, is, I think, in less than, at this point in time, 12 hours time. And as you know, I do my new moon videos after the new moon occurs. There's ample information about the eclipses in the videos I've done recently. Going back to the video I did with Mercury in Gemini, regarding Mercury in Gemini, and all the videos since then, if you just look at my video list, the Mercury in Gemini video and all the videos since then, including the lunar eclipse video, should give you a pretty good idea of what this eclipse cycle is about in terms of its core, um, in terms of the way the lunations are set up and the transits are set up around it. We're still going to have a new moon solar eclipse video in Gemini tomorrow, and I can assure you, you won't need it till tomorrow, if even probably a couple of days after that, but you will have it tomorrow. As I said, I always like to do those videos after the fact. I did, however, want to do this video, which is still an eclipse video, and it is reflecting on the full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius 2 weeks ago. But before I launched into the solar eclipse video, I wanted to set the stage for it a little bit and talk about a couple of things related to these eclipses. First and foremost, tomorrow's eclipse is a solar eclipse. It is a new moon. And, you know, just studying the lunations and how they apply to your chart can sort of become not a full-time job, but, you know, pretty consuming in and of itself. If you just start to factor where the moon is in your chart in any given time, and if you also pull a lunar return chart, and for people who are new to astrology, please just ignore this minute or two I'm spending on this. You know, between the lunar return chart and where the moon is in your lunar return at any given point in time, and then which new moons have occurred and when is the corresponding full moon. So you have a new moon, and 6 months later you have a full moon in the same part of the sign. So if we've had a new moon in Taurus on May the 11th, we will have a full moon in Taurus on November the 19th, just as if we're having a new moon in Gemini on June the 10th, in the middle of December. I don't have the exact date. I wonder if it's something like December the 13th or so, but I'll check. You would have a full moon in Gemini. And these 6-month cycles, there are different theories about them. I just think it's fascinating to observe. I still think that in and of itself, a new moon and a full moon has a lot of power. And where the moon is in your chart at any given time, and then where the moon is in the lunar return, are somehow more important than these 6-month cycles that a lot of astrologers spend time on. But when it comes to eclipses, we really do have to look at the solar eclipse, the new moon solar eclipse, and when you have the corresponding lunar eclipse. Well, starting tomorrow, the eclipses start to change signs. They're currently on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, and we will have one more eclipse in Sagittarius. We had one on May the 26th. We're going to have one more solar eclipse, new moon solar eclipse in Sagittarius on December the 3rd. So the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, for all intents and purposes, remains active till about June of next year. It remains strong till about February the 3rd of next year, because for some reason I've always observed that 2 months after a new moon solar eclipse, the date is somehow important. And indeed, all the new moons following a new moon solar eclipse and the full moons before a lunar eclipse, you know, there's a constant conversation between the lunations. Again, just studying the moon can be fascinating with regard to your chart and what exactly is developing and how it's developing. But as I've said, priority goes to the lunation itself, the new moon or the full moon, then of course, where the moon is in your chart at any given time, where the moon is in your lunar return, and then these cycles, except with eclipses, we really do have to look at the new moon solar eclipse and the corresponding lunar eclipse. Well, the new moon on May the 11th in Taurus culminates in a full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus, the first of the Taurus-Scorpio eclipses, on November the 19th. But eclipses bookend each other, so the eclipse tomorrow on June the 10th is also going to, at least some part of that energy is going to bookend on the November 19th eclipse. Some of it will close out in the middle of December with the Gemini full moon. So that was one interesting tidbit I wanted to give you, which is to say, Don't discount, even though the last new moon was a normal new moon in Taurus, not an eclipse, don't discount whatever's been going on over the past month or so as somehow being important and relevant to eclipses. It is anyway, because we had a full moon lunar eclipse on May the 26th. So we had the new moon in Taurus, we had the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, so we now have the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini tomorrow. So already, by the time we factor in the May 11th Taurus new moon, we're in eclipse season. And the second thing I wanted to mention is, even though a lot of the emphasis that I have placed on these eclipses, I think understandably, since the Mercury in Gemini video I did, has been on the Neptune transits and the transits in Pisces and the Jupiter in Pisces, and because of the squares to Pisces that have been on, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. You know, normal eclipsy things are still very present, you know, accidents, sudden happenings, things being brought into your life, things exiting from your life, people or situations or things being eclipsed into and out of our lives. The preponderance of deaths, hearing information about deaths, and if people are on some sort of a mortality timeline, further developments around learning about what exactly is going on with people and where they're at, you know, an improvement or decline or something along those lines, but also just passings or the thinning of the veil between this world and the next world. All of that applies. The suddenness of something happening, the eclipsiness of something happening, the unpredictability, the unforeseen nature. Sometimes good news in terms of offers and help and things coming in suddenly, especially starting the May 11th Taurus new moon, you know, things being ushered in. And then also sometimes bad news, so to speak, you know, with the eclipses. So because my emphasis in the past few videos has been so much about the planets in Gemini and Sagittarius and Pisces, I really just wanted to acknowledge, kind of in almost worshipful terms, because eclipses are so important, and as I've mentioned before, eclipses are when God takes the wheel. So I wanted to give the eclipses their due in this kind of astrology compass video to say, you know, especially as we were heading towards the May 26th eclipse, if things started to get intense and there was an intensity in the air and you were hearing about eclipsy things, just, I think it's worth it to just sit and be present with the energy sometimes as well. Now, the energy is going to shift starting tomorrow, but at least for another couple of weeks after tomorrow, till the full moon in Capricorn, we're still, you know, we're still in the heart of eclipse season. And certainly when we look at June the 10th, then we've got to look at August the 10th, 2 months after the solar eclipse tomorrow, as an important date as well, related to this eclipse that occurs tomorrow. So we're still very much in the midst of things, but we are in a slightly more reflective phase, I think. We are taking stock of things and situations and evaluating and perhaps, you know, investigating how we feel, what is going on. More on that tomorrow, after perhaps being in the churn of this eclipse season and feeling a little bit beaten up by it. It's not unusual. It is not unusual. And the strange news may well continue. Eclipse news may well continue. There were two other things I really wanted to mention in this video. Two I've already mentioned, and I'm going to do a quick summary at the end. And one is the sign of Sagittarius, where we had the lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago, concerns very much our compass, our intuitive compass, our moral compass, our belief systems, our sense of what is true for us. And when you have an eclipse of release or a south node eclipse in Sagittarius, somewhere with this particular eclipse cycle, I think it's really important to mention that there's an old way of being that is being retired. Something about this old way of being retired comes back to us to be retired even more between December the 3rd of 2021 and February the 3rd of 2022 with the next Gemini, the next Sagittarius solar eclipse. But with other eclipse cycles, the signs they occur in provide a different color to them. And the Sagittarius eclipse and all the changes and everything that is going on, this very much marks the ending of an old chapter and an ushering in of a new one. And at the core of it, somewhere, what is being shifted and rewired and rejigged or reassembled or reconfigured, configured again. It's a new configuration. It's as if like an old software is being retired. And that's what it really feels like. It feels like it's a new operating system update. It feels like there's a new version of Windows available, or there's a new version of iOS available, and all these things are going to be done, and it's a major update to your operating system. The way I would look at it even more, because it was a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, and I think we have enough distance from it to really understand it on some level. There's a lot that is shifting and changing. That can be said of all eclipse cycles, but with this particular eclipse cycle, it really concerns starting to put to bed an old version of ourselves. And that would be very in line and in keeping with South Node eclipses in Sagittarius. Something about our entire compass and our entire operating system, how our belief systems, how we operate, what we believe to be true or not, how we perceive the universe, how we perceive spirit, how we co-create, how we are in communication with God as spirit, how we are in communication with our truest self, our goals, our higher truth, our unalloyed self, our higher self. An old version of that is being released based on all these eclipsy things that are occurring. And then I'll talk more about the Gemini new moon tomorrow. So this really is the most important point that I want to mention. If it resonates, then do pay attention to it, and do put some thought into, if you can, especially if you know where Sagittarius sits in your chart, what house it occupies, what that house stands for. You know, sometimes rituals, or sometimes even taking some time to reflect on, it's still you, but there are lessons that have been learned. There is something, there's an old you, there's an old set of actions, there's an old set of way of looking at the world, there's an old set of holding ourselves and navigating ourselves through this world that is being retired. There's a new belief system, a new version of ourselves, a new, more authentic self, a new relationship with God, spirit, our unalloyed self, that is very much in the works with these eclipses, with this particular eclipse cycle in the Gemini, on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis. And I think with all of that said, I kind of wanted to really leave it with that. Before we dive into tomorrow's video. So number one, an acknowledgement that while a lot of my content has been, understandably, because the squares to Neptune are notable and strong and powerful and surprising and unmistakable and unignorable, there's been a lot of emphasis on the planetary transits in Gemini and Sagittarius and Pisces, and the squares to Neptune. And the square to Neptune is so pronounced with the eclipse tomorrow, it is not even funny. It is not even funny. Of course, it's, you know, tomorrow's new moon eclipse is conjunct Mercury retrograde and square Neptune. And I don't mean kind of sort of conjunct. I don't mean that there's no wideness to these orbs. It is conjunct Mercury retrograde, it is square Neptune. More on that tomorrow. But at the same time, there's a general eclipsiness that I also wanted to acknowledge and pay homage to and respect. The shifting sands, the emphasis on mortality, the eclipsing of situations, things, people that are unavoidable and have a kind of a God taking the wheel, fated accidents, injuries, sudden things happening kind of feel to them. I also wanted to mention and talk about the fact that the eclipses are changing signs after tomorrow, and that process is starting. So it's not just tomorrow's eclipse that is important with this eclipse cycle, but even the events of the past 4 weeks since the Taurus new moon. Where does Taurus sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? What does it stand for? What has been going on with that house over the past month? A little bit more important than normal. Quite important, because that part of the chart is going to gain greater and greater and greater emphasis and focus as we head into 2022. And then I also wanted to really, just in the spirit of an Astro Compass video, say and emphasize that with these particular eclipses, there is an old belief system and an old version of ourselves that is being retired, and not in the usual way of eclipses because of the situation that is being eclipsed, and we adjust to it. There's something about these eclipses that is causing us to shut down, and by the time we reboot, we're somehow operating with better software based on everything that we've experienced over the past few years and what we feel needs to be retired and what we feel needs to be taken on as a new lens in a Sagittarian way, with a new compass, with a new intuitive compass, a moral compass, with greater authenticity, and in a way that aligns us much more powerfully with our ability to co-create. Okay, I'm going to leave it at this. I will talk to you all tomorrow. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you're notified when I do new updates. You know, the time before a new moon solar eclipse is a little flat. You know, it's a little bit depressed, it's a little bit plain. There were a couple of people who commented that my full moon eclipse video, you know, it's very heightened, and I was very heightened. You know, it's a full moon eclipse, and the tone of this video is different. It is a video I'm doing before a new moon, and it has a placidity, comparative placidity to it, as placid as I can be. You know, comparative placidity to it. So tomorrow's video will have more content and more energy, and it's probably been nice to have the last week to just kind of reflect. This is one of those times when Mercury retrograde seems fated and helpful. Anyway, I'll carry on tomorrow. I sort of enjoy starting to chat and taking it there. My contact information, my email address is going to be in the description box. So if you need to contact me or would like to contact me for rates for readings for your chart, or if you'd like me to make an easy to read version of your chart that tells you which planets are in which signs and in which houses and what those houses stand for, you can use that email to inquire about rates, and we can take it from there, right? More tomorrow. Rest well. And as always, we look forward to a new moon, and we actually look forward to a new moon solar eclipse because at least it starts to allow us to move forward, even though tomorrow's solar eclipse has one sight. It's like one eye is looking forward and one eye is looking backwards, but more of that tomorrow. It was a weird image. All right.